What passed through my mind as I lay unconscious was nothing short of a horrific nightmare. The dark Pharaoh swam through my thoughts, morphing and changing forms of the cosmos. He was tearing apart galaxies, exiling the very laws of nature and physics, opening portals to impossible worlds. Laughing joyously, he turned only briefly to make sure I was watching, witnessing the twisting and contorting of all logic, the mutation and undoing of reality, the opening and merging with infinity. I saw the birth and death of the universe with the awakening of a beast. Beside him, above, below, surrounding, came beings of these dark and impossible worlds. The planets shifted in their presence, drawn to their will, betraying their very suns. The mere sight of them, how much it nearly destroyed me. This couldn't be real. There was no sense to any of it, to any of these creatures, no rhyme by which to pace anything anymore. The Pharaoh himself continued to change forms before I could even blink my eyes. In a moment he was the Pharaoh. In another he was a thin, holy man. Then he was a monstrosity, a hellish black spider. He spread his being into a gargantuan serpent, stretching to the stars with a large mouth halfway down his body. In a heartbeat he had changed again into an old man, then smaller still, into a child. He was a constant inconsistency. I struggled in the wicked and violent sea of insanity, trying to find a point of anchor as a storm of destruction and chaos raged around us. For a while, I thought I had finally given way to madness, that I had broken by the very thing which pushed Professor Wilcox over the edge. Madness would have been so much easier, simpler, but I held on. In my swirling visions, I dared to look away from the Pharaoh. I fought to remove his laughter. The pain in my head radiated through my body, weakening me, forcing me to collapse. I was freezing, sinking, drowning in the sea of insanity. No, I wouldn't go like this. I would live on, with defiance and spite, with no other reason than refusal to let the Pharaoh defeat me, like he did my mentor. I forced my eyes wide open. Cold and darkness. These were the first and only two things I sensed. With my rapid, shallow breaths, I could smell moisture in the air. A bit off in the distance, I could hear whispered chanting of many voices. Tilting my head slightly towards the direction of the sound, I could see an adjacent chamber and a faint glow of candlelight. I was laying down on the wet stone floor, and the left side of my face was freezing as a result. Try as I may to bring relief to the left side of my face and take in my surroundings, a deep pain shot through my head, and I surrendered to my body's wishes to rest. My moan of pain echoed off the stone walls as I lowered my head back down. The chanting ceased. In its place came the sounds of footsteps and shuffling of fabric, growing louder as they moved closer. A black-robed and hooded figure towered over me as I lay unable to move upon the floor. He watched me for a moment before crouching down to inspect me. I flinched when he touched my head with his icy hand, not knowing what the stranger wanted. Once satisfied with what he did or didn't find, the robed figure turned towards the direction of the candlelit room. "The historian awakens, Oracle." I did not understand what was happening. I did not know where I was. I had decided I must still be trapped in my visions. Perhaps it was even damage to an injured brain. But no. I was wide awake, and I was trapped. From the darkness came three more figures, hooded in heavy black robes. The shadow of the room helped to hide their faces, but I immediately recognized one of them. The two other figures I didn't recognize pulled me, without mercy or sympathy, to my feet. I met the eyes of the man before me. Dr. Richards looked quite pleased. "Very good," he whispered while nodding. I fought through the pain to keep my head raised, letting the other two men support me. Who are... The pain and my fury were too much, and I felt my sense of reality clinging by the thread of a spider. I had no idea who these people were, or where I was, or what was happening. All I knew was that it had something to do with the Ankh. Richards couldn't be stopped. You'll have your answers, and much more. This I promise, Richards assured me. I must say I was quite surprised to learn you would be the one instead. Richards held his hands out and let opposite fingers touch their respective twins as he studied and judged me. Ah, but you have no idea what I'm talking about, do you? I sneered at his patronizing tone. Richards wanted the Pharaoh. What else could it have been? Wilcox was right. The Ankh, whatever its connection to the Pharaoh, made it dangerous. All the same, I still carried the urge, the need to know what it all meant, the things I saw, what Wilcox and I both experienced. Only yesterday I was a different person. Now everything was about this enigmatic, completely illogical being. I cared for nothing else. I wanted and needed to know. Richard's eyebrows arched. And that is what separates you from Wilcox. My eyes widened. Was he reading my thoughts? All of my visions said it might be Wilcox. With his background, his experience, and desire to get the job done, I knew he would be a good fit. Richard swung his hands behind his back and began to pace. He continued on. Then again, maybe Wilcox was merely a means to an end. Our Lord's reasoning and plans are known only to himself, despite what he shares with me. I didn't understand what Richards was talking about. Apart from what Wilcox had requested, there was nothing to which I was connected to any of this, and not to this cult or whatever Richards had made in the name of his Pharaoh. History, human history, is one thing, but how do you prepare someone for such a mighty power as that of the Pharaoh? Despite the hood and the shadows playing along his face, I could see Richards was smiling. You let them experience it, of course. So that was it. That was the reason he sent Wilcox into that hellish place, to retrieve the Ankh. He wanted Wilcox to get a taste and become addicted. He might have died out there, I accused through my clenched teeth. Richards let out a hearty laugh. He was already at the Pharaoh's mercy. Wilcox was the one I thought he wanted. There would be no death for him with the power he carried with him. You talk of power, I growled. And where was this power when he ended his own life? The pain from my rage buckled my knees. The roped men held me in place. He failed. The flatness in Richard's voice stunned me. He was being tested. Wilcox wanted no part in this. He had no desire to pursue the knowledge, to witness and experience the living proof of a god. He was too much a man of logic, and such a narrow-mindedness cost him everything. Richards was serious now, locking his gaze with mine. I knew that place. I knew the tides. I knew of that ancient place of worship because I opened my mind. The Pharaoh can tell you many things. Richards could sense it. I knew he could. I hated this damn Pharaoh, god, abomination, whatever he is. I loathed and feared the powers he yielded, the things I saw and learned about him. I hated all of it, but he haunted me. I knew from the moment I saw him, felt the power of the Ankh. I was obsessed. I was a slave to his will. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know everything. Richard smiled again, tilting his head. He looked upon me as a proud professor might when pleased with one of his students, never looking away. So different. You will do a great service to our great God. At this, Richards turned and began marching back to the source of light, walking side by side with the first roped man who inspected me. The two men who held me followed Richards, dragging me along between them. The man beside Richards moved up to cross the threshold of the room of candles. The oracle returns. We welcome at last the historian. A few murmurs spilled out of the room upon the announcement. My thoughts returned, as they always do now, to the Pharaoh. A great service. I am meant to serve the Pharaoh? I stood with all the strength of a rag doll in the arms of my escorts, utterly lost. "What am I to do?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Richards answered without turning. "Our Lord finds the idea of a historian amusing. As the latest of his and his family's chroniclers has recently died, he decided to seek out another. He chose one from here as a matter of convenience. You have no idea how lucky you are. We've been waiting years for this moment. You were the final piece." So there it was. I was meant to record the Pharaoh's deeds to amuse him, to be a plaything. I would be by his side then? He would speak to me? "You will indeed be at his call nearly always," Richards answered my thoughts. "I, on the other hand, will continue to enforce his will as his oracle. He has given me a wonderful gift of knowledge, and he will do the same for you." He paused for a moment, reading my silence. "You want to see him? Of course you do. He beguiles us all." As Richard spoke these words, I was brought into a room of enormous size. Looking around the expanse, I thought back to the empty audience chamber within the monolith described in Wilcox's journal. This was the very picture he painted with his words. The large, circular room with mysterious black stone, a throne of golden skulls at the center of it all. This is what my eyes beheld now, except instead of an empty chamber resurrected from a deep sea, the room was filled with black-robed figures. They sat bowed, dotting the expanse, all alight with 1,000 candles. Richards moved through the crowd and approached the throne. From within his robes, he produced the Black Ankh, holding it as though he would use the sharp, dagger-like end as a weapon. Once the Ankh was in sight, the crowd of worshippers began to chant again, and this time their words were coherent. "Ni ar Lethotep. Ni ar Lethotep." The true name of the Pharaoh resounded around the chamber like a song, and like a curse. Looking back now, I didn't want to stop what happened next. The truth is, I couldn't even if I wanted to. Richards approached the throne and raised the Ankh above his head to show all the followers. Seeing the key, the worshippers chanted louder and more rapidly. The men who dragged me into the chamber fell to their knees at the sight of it to accompany the chanting, and I joined them on the floor, still weak and disoriented. Stoic and powerful in his role as oracle, Richards thrust the Black Ankh into the slot in the throne, obeying the call of his god. From 3 points of the room came a thunderous roar of power. The chamber burst with light as electric arcs erupted forth, all targeting the throne, the Ankh itself. From the throne, the Black Ankh split in half, exposing the void. From within, above the chaos, came the unmistakable sound of the dark Pharaoh's laughter. Out of the void he came, standing in the electric arcs of the machine in which we all knelt. I froze, horrified and dazzled by his magnificence. In my heart, I surrendered to him. My life was his, and there was no going back. As though watching from another place, I too bowed and joined the chanting, naming my new god. Thus began a new reign of Nyarlathotep here in Providence. To this day I am in his service, free to think but unable, or perhaps unwilling to act against him. My God, he has shown me what is to come. He has shown me his plans. The visions I had were only the beginning of what was to come. All of it will begin here. Everything focused on this one point, and it will spread across the stars. There is nothing I can do to stop it now. I had my chance. To anyone who finds this, the old gods are waking up. They are being summoned by Nyarlathotep. Even as I scrawl out these words, he showed me himself. This is all my fault. I failed to hide the key. I I failed all of you. My eternal punishment shall be witnessing what comes, unable to stop the madness, unable to leave my Lord's side, forever powerless. I am so sorry.